chapter 23. The end of Acts 22, just to kind of catch you up in where we were and what we were looking at. In Acts 22, the Apostle Paul has made his way to Jerusalem. He's been warned by numerous people before he went that he should not go, that it wasn't a place that was safe for him. But the Spirit told we should go. So he went. And while he was there, he had the opportunity to give his testimony, basically, and to use that as a jumping off point to witness to the group of people that are there, the individuals that are there before him. Now, obviously, they did not receive this very well. As we're told, basically, you have a group of people. He basically creates almost like a riot, and they're going to kill him. The Roman tribute goes down. They rescue him. They bring him out of there. It picks us up. We pick this up actually in Acts 22, verse 30. It says, "And on the morrow, because they would have known of certainty whether he was accused of the Jews, he loosed him from his bands and commanded the chief priests and all their councils to appear, and brought Paul down and set him before them." So this Roman tribute calls a meeting with the Sanhedrin to clarify the charges against the Apostle Paul. Paul claims ignorance. The high priest orders Paul struck. Paul strikes back, but not with his hands. Strikes back by, in fact, declaring the prophecy that's given to him from God regarding the high priest himself. Paul sees and realizes, understands the Sanhedrin. It's made up of a group of individuals who do not agree. It's made up of Sadducees and Pharisees. One of the key issues that's between those two that they do not agree with on at all is the issue of the resurrection. Go down to verse 6 of Acts 23. It says in Acts 23, verse 6, "But when Paul perceived that one part were Sadducees and the other Pharisees, he cried out in council, 'Men and brethren, I am a Pharisee, and the son of a Pharisee, and of the hope of the resurrection of the dead, I am called into question.'" So what he basically talks about, he says, this is all because of the resurrection of the dead and my proclaiming that Jesus resurrected from the dead, that this whole thing has come about. Well, as a result of that, the Sanhedrin becomes a shouting match between the Pharisees, who believe in the resurrection, and the Sadducees, who do not. And as a result of it, you can see here in verse 8, "For the Sadducees say that there is no resurrection, neither the angels nor spirits, but the Pharisees confess both. And there rose a great cry. The scribes that were the Pharisees rose and strove, saying, 'We find no evil in this man. But if the spirit or an angel has spoken to him, let us not fight against God.' And there arose a certain dissension. The chief captain, fearing lest Paul should be pulled in pieces of them, commanded the soldiers to go down, taken by force from among them, and to bring him into the castle." So the Roman soldiers, the Roman tribute's the one that set this whole thing up, sees what's going on. The Roman soldiers see this shouting match is taking place in full view of where they are. Around the temple, there is I can't remember the name of it, the Herodium, I believe it is. It's right off the area, the temple area. It was, in fact, an outpost of Roman soldiers that was built right off of the temple compound. It was built there because the temple was a possibility of an area of problem, because they figured these guys, if they're going to rebel, it's going to start there. So these guys rush down, they rescue the Apostle Paul. The Roman soldiers rush down, they rescue him from being mauled by the warring council members. He spends a night in the cell. And when he spends his night in the cell, and I did not forget to pray, I'm going to get there eventually. I'm just trying to catch us up to where we actually are. In Acts chapter 23, verse 10, it says this: "And when there arose a great dissension, the chief captain, fearing Paul should have been pulled to pieces of them, commanded the soldiers to go down and to take him by force among them, and to bring him into the castle," the barracks of where they were. Look at verse 11. "And the night following, the Lord stood by him and said, Be of good cheer, Paul, for thou hast testified of me in Jerusalem, so must thou bear witness also of Rome." Let's look at one prayer. Father, I thank you for this day you've given. I thank you, Lord, for the way you've worked in our lives. I pray as we take a few moments, Lord, to take a look at the passage that's here before us in Acts 24. Help us to learn some principles. Help us to gain some truths. I pray you be with us and bless in all that's done now. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Where we're picking up the record is actually in chapter 23, verse 12. I want to start reading in chapter 23, 12. I'm going to read down through verse 35. "And when it was day, certain of the Jews banded together, and bound themselves under a curse, saying that they would neither eat nor drink till they had killed Paul. And they were more than 40, which made this conspiracy. And they came to the chief priests and elders and said, We have bound ourselves under a great curse. They will eat nothing until we have slain Paul. Now therefore, ye with the council signify the chief captain that he bring him down unto you tomorrow, as though ye would inquire something more perfectly concerning him, and we, or ever he come near, are ready to kill him. And when Paul's sister's son heard of their lying in wait, he went and entered into the castle and told Paul. Then Paul called one of the centurions unto him and said, Bring this young man unto the chief captain, for he hath a certain thing to tell him. So he took him and brought him to the chief captain and said, Paul the prisoner called me unto him, and prayed me to bring this young man to thee, who hath something to say unto thee. And the chief captain took him by the hand, and went with him aside privately, and asked him, What is it that thou hast to tell me? And he said, The Jews have agreed to desire thee, that thou wouldest bring down Paul tomorrow into council, as though they would inquire somewhat of him more perfectly. But do not thou yield unto them, for they lie in wait for him, and of them more than 40 men, which have bound themselves with an oath, that they will neither eat nor drink till they have killed him. And now are they ready, looking for a promise from thee. So the chief captain then let the young man depart, and charged him, See that thou tell no man what thou hast showed these things to me. And he called unto him 2 centurions, saying, Make ready 200 soldiers to go to Caesarea, and horsemen 70, and spearmen 200, and 30, and at the third hour of the night. And provide them with beasts, that they may set Paul on, and bring him safely unto Felix the governor. And he wrote a letter unto this manner, Claudius Lystra, unto the most excellent governor Felix, sendeth greetings. This man was taken of the Jews, and should have been killed of them. Then came I with an army, and rescued him, having understood that he was a Roman. And when I would have known the cause wherewith they accused him, I brought him forth into the council, whom I perceived to be accused of questions of their law, but to have nothing laid to his charge worthy of death or bonds. And when it was told me that the Jews lay wait for the man, I said straightway to thee, and gave commandment to this accusers also, to say before thee that they had against him farewell. Then the soldiers, as it was commanded them, took Paul, and brought him by night to Antibus. And on the morrow they left the horsemen to go with him, and returned to the castle. When they came to Caesarea, and delivered the epistle to the governor, presented Paul also before him. When the governor had read the letter, he asked of the province he was. And when he understood that he was of Cilicia, I will hear thee, said he, when thine accusers are also come. And he commanded him to be kept in Herod's judgment hall. What we have going on here, there is an attempt on Paul's life. An attempting to try to break it down so at least it's understandable. I have the plan of persecution, the provision of the Lord, and I want to look also at the protection of the servant. First of all, the plan of persecution is found in verses 12 through through 15. Go with me there for a moment. And there were certain of the Jews banded together and bound themselves under a curse, saying that they would neither eat nor drink till they had killed Paul. And there were more than 40 which had made this conspiracy. And they came to the chief priests and elders and said, we would have bound ourselves under a great curse. We will eat nothing until we have slain Paul. Now therefore, ye with the council signify the chief captain, that he be brought down unto you tomorrow, as though you would inquire something more perfectly concerning him. And we, or ever he come near, are ready to kill him. So these radicals planned, there's probably 40 men that planned this. They're probably zealots, more than likely. There were a lot of zealots in and around the temple area who were always ready to fight. These guys apparently had planned this scheme out. The interesting thing is these are the very people that Paul went to Jerusalem to speak to. You know, if you go with me just for a moment, you can keep your finger there, to Romans chapter 9, I want us to look at the heart of the Apostle Paul concerning the Jewish people. He said, I say the truth in Christ, I lie not. My conscience, although bearing me witness in the Holy Ghost, that I have a great heaviness and continual sorrow in my heart. For I would wish that I myself were accursed for Christ, for my brethren, my kinsmen according to the flesh. Now it had been God's choice to make Paul the apostle to the Gentiles. But Paul said, I have this burning desire. He said, I have this grief and heaviness in my heart. He said, I give myself. I would have myself accursed so that they could hear the word of God. Paul was very, very, very concerned about these people. Yet these were the same ones who were attempting to kill him. You know, something like that could be quite discouraging. There are times we witness to people and those very same people turn against us. There are times we put our life into people's lives and those very same people turn against us. And it's very, very tempting to get discouraged and disappointed. The fact of it is we can't quit following Christ because of people. Because someone makes a bad choice, because someone does something that's wrong, we can't quit our following Christ because of what they have done. You know, the Apostle Paul could have looked at this story and said, forget this. Why am I doing this? Here I came to tell these guys and they're going to kill me. Not only were they going to kill him, they were going to lie to be able to kill him. They schemed this whole thing up. Notice, by the way, that it's approved by the religious leaders. These guys are part and parcel of the deal. They came to them, and you don't see them saying, oh no, we don't want to do this. Wouldn't you think that would be the way to go? They should be going, oh no, you don't want to do this. You don't want to kill this guy. You don't want to lie. You would think that's what they would be doing, but they're not doing that. They don't have a problem at all with the lying. They don't have a problem at all with the fact that they plan on killing this guy. They don't care. See, there was a plan of persecution here. But I want us to notice the provision of the Lord. You see, the wicked had planned. But it's really nothing for God to bring to naught the plans of the wicked. There were 40 men bound in an oath that they wouldn't eat again until Paul was dead. Now, I do imagine they got pretty hungry pretty quick, because there was their plan to do it the very next day. But it wasn't God's plan. I want us to notice the provision of the Lord. I want us to notice, first of all, a faithful nephew. Look at verse 16. It says that Paul's sister's son heard of their lying in wait. He went and entered into the castle and told Paul. Then Paul called one of the centurions unto him and said, bring this young man unto the chief captain, for he hath a certain thing to tell him. So he took him and brought him to the chief captain and said, Paul, the prisoner, calleth me unto him, I pray, and pray me to bring this young man unto thee, who hath something to say to thee. Then the chief captain took the man by the hand and went with him aside privily and asked him, what is it that thou hast to tell me? Apparently this child is, number one, very small and seemingly insignificant. Now, otherwise, these guys would not have been talking in front of him if he was not one of them. There have been people who read this account and go, oh, there's no way. They read verse 19, they say, Chief Captain, he takes this kid's hand as he treats him with kindness. This is the same guy that ordered Paul's whipping just a couple days before. That would not have been an uncommon thing for the Roman centurions to do. What they were doing, the cruelty that they did, was their job. A young child would not have been his job to be mean to the young child. He would have treated the kid with kindness as he would have treated his own children, because many of these centurions were married with children. The guy comes in, the kid comes in, here's this scheming plan, comes and speaks to the centurion, speaks to the Apostle Paul. The Apostle Paul calls someone who then passes it on, and eventually it makes it up to the top, the chief captain. Not only do we have a faithful nephew, I want us to notice a fearful captain. This guy knew he had to get Paul out of Jerusalem. Now, why was he concerned about taking care of the Apostle Paul? What did he find out about Paul a couple chapters ago, or a chapter ago? Paul's a Roman. Paul is a Roman citizen. He found this out after he had beaten the Apostle Paul, which, by the way, was illegal for a Roman citizen to be beaten. Anyone else could be beaten and win. Roman citizens were not allowed to be beaten. And he had to be protected because that was part of Roman law. He was protected by Roman law. He was protected against abuse of power. He was also protected against being allowed to be killed by the Jewish people who were after him. This guy knew he had to get Paul out of Jerusalem. He had to. He didn't have a choice. He knew that it was going to be one problem after another. He could have probably gone down and dealt with those 40 guys. He could have put them all on crosses and crucified them all. That wouldn't have been something the Romans would have considered doing. Because they had done that before. They had crucified large numbers of people in rebellions. It wasn't a big deal for them to kill one or two. It was not at all. But he knew it was going to be a continual problem, one after another, after another. Go with me just for a moment to Proverbs 21, verse 1. Proverbs 21, verse 1. This individual, this Roman captain, man of war, was considerate and worried about Paul's plight. And you think, well, why? Well, he was a Roman citizen. I think the whole thing comes down to actually this verse here. Proverbs 21:1 says, the king's heart is in the hand of the Lord, as the rivers of water can turn it whithersoever he will. Remember what the verse I read to you in verse 10 of chapter 23, where Jesus said to Paul in a vision, Paul, you have testified before me in Jerusalem, you're going to do it in Rome. He had to get to Rome. If something wasn't done to stop this thing, he was going to die right there. And so God was using this Roman captain to get Paul on his way to Rome. And that's exactly what he was doing. See, we have the plan of the persecution. We have the provision of the Lord. God used this nephew who was there. He used this captain who was there. See, God can use who he needs to use to accomplish what he wants to accomplish. I want us to notice also the protection for his servant. The protection for his servant. And this really seems to be over the top. But you know what? Back in the book of Daniel. Daniel chapter 4, verse 35. Daniel 4:35. I want to read it to you in just a second so we get there. Daniel 4:35. It says this. And all the inhabitants of the earth are reputed as nothing. And he doeth according to his will in the army of heaven, and among the inhabitants of the earth. And none can stay his hand, or say unto him, what doest thou? See, God is in control of what goes on. He ultimately is. God was going to protect his servant regardless of what these 40 men were planning, regardless of what the Sanhedrin wanted to see done, regardless of what the chief priest wanted to see accomplished. They wanted Paul dead. They truly wanted Paul dead. They did not want to see him prosper at all. They wanted him dead. They didn't want to see him go on to Rome. They wanted to see him go in the ground. But God wanted to see him testify in life. God wanted his ministry to continue. God was not done with the Apostle Paul yet. Oh yeah, it seemed like he was. Because the Apostle Paul had spent all these earlier years of his ministry, though he did spend much time in prison, by the way. You know, I've jokingly said whenever Paul went to a city, he checked out the jail, because he was going to be there the next night. But Paul often would get out of jail and would continue on. Starting in this, what happens right here. Paul is pretty much never truly free till he dies. But God was not done with the Apostle Paul. God had much for the Apostle Paul to do. God wanted Paul to go to Rome. He wanted him to be able to have an opportunity to witness to many in Caesar's household. And there were many parts of Scripture that were yet to be done. God was not done with the Apostle Paul. We see the protection of the servant. I want us to notice, look here, this whole issue with the guards. I want to start reading in verse 23. So the chief captain then let the young man depart, and charged him, saying, I'm in 22. See that thou tell no man, but that thou hast showed me these things, or revealed is what I did there. And he called unto him 2 centurions, saying, make ready. Look at how many people he gets ready here. Listen to this. 200 soldiers to go to Caesarea, and horsemen 70, and spearmen 200 at the 3rd hour of the night. This tribute assigns a force of 470 Roman legionnaires to escort the Apostle Paul in the middle of the night to Caesarea. 470 Roman soldiers. That was enough to hold off most armies. The Romans were proud of their ability to fight. These guys were tenacious. These guys were tough. 470 were hurriedly gathered together in the middle of the night, and they left for Jerusalem about 9 o'clock at night. And it really was a forced march. They went 37 miles that night. Paul was riding on some kind of animal. There were others who were riding too, the cavalry guys who were riding. But most of those soldiers were on foot marching, and they went 37 miles that night to get the Apostle Paul to Caesarea, where he'd be saved. Notice the guards. I want us to also notice the letter that's sent before them. So what ends up happening here, he sends this group on. Actually, we'll start in verse 23. He called unto him 2 centurions, saying, make ready 200 soldiers to go to Caesarea, horsemen 70, spearmen 200 at the 3rd hour of the night. Provide them beasts, that they may set Paul on, and bring him safe unto Felix the governor. And he wrote a letter after this manner. Claudius Lysias, unto the most excellent governor Felix. His name was actually Marcus Antonius Felix. Sendeth greetings. This man was taken of the Jews, and should have been killed of them. Then came I with an army and rescued him, having understood he was a Roman. And when I would have known the cause wherewith they accused him, I brought him forth into their council, whom I perceived to be accused of the question of their law. So the captain, he wants to avoid the final decision. He does not want to be the guy who has to pronounce this guy guilty or innocent. He refers him to a higher court, and he sends him hurriedly off to this higher court. He views this as a local Jewish squabble. And it was going to end badly no matter what he did. You can tell that he thinks that in verse 29. I pursued to the accusers of the question of their law. but to have nothing laid to their charge worthy of death or bonds. And when I was told how the Jews laid wait for him, I sent straightway to thee and gave commandment to his accusers, also to say before thee what they had against him. Farewell. So he says, I want this to be taken care of by you. I want to, you need to deal with this. See, Paul's Roman citizenship, as I said, gave him the protection of the Roman law and the Roman army. But it also gave him an opportunity to witness to many more Gentiles, who the Apostle Paul was, in fact, the apostle to the Gentiles. See, God had prepared, interesting enough, God had prepared the Apostle Paul even before the Apostle Paul knew he was going to be the Apostle Paul. If you read back in the chapters, this Claudius Lysias, the captain, he had bought his Roman citizenship. Paul was born as a Roman citizen. His family had been in the right place. He had been born of the right family. Very much specifically to set him in the position to be exactly what God wanted him to be. God had prepared him. God had brought things in his life that set him up to be the person God wanted to be. There are often things that we go through in our lives. And often our question that we say is, why in the world me? But often God uses things we go through to prepare us to serve him better. Because we're ready to deal with people exactly like us, who are dealing with situations just like ours. God had prepared him. He reaches Caesarea, we're told, safely. He's going to be kept there for the next 2 years. Felix basically suggests, I'm going to wait till they show up. And Felix is trying to get him to bribe him to get free eventually. We'll see that in later chapters. But he really stays there for about 2 years. During that time, he had a number of political leaders that he was able to witness to. And he was safe from death. See, God was in control. God knew what he was going to do in Paul's life. He brought Paul exactly where he wanted Paul to be, to do what Paul was supposed to do. There are often times in our life where God brings us to a place where we're right where we need to be. So I don't see how that can be the case. Often that's because we don't really look at it that way. But God is in control. Psalm 91. Psalm 91 is probably one of my favorite verses. Well, chapters, I should say. Psalm 91, beginning in verse 3. Actually, I'll start at verse 1. 3 to 5 is what I want to read. The verses 1. First verses are my favorite ones. He that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High shall abide in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, he is my refuge and my fortress. My God, in him will I trust. Surely he shall deliver thee from the snare of the fowler, and from the noisome pestilence. He shall cover thee with his feathers, and under his wings shalt thou trust. His truth shall be thy shield and buckler. Thou shalt not be afraid of the terror by night, nor of the arrow that flieth by day. See, God is ultimately in control. He was in control of what was going to happen to Paul. He was in control of what was going to go on in Paul's life. And he's ultimately in control of what happens to us too. The thing I want us to notice and think about is Paul's faithfulness through the midst. Paul's in jail. He's in jail. Talk about a wonderful time to get depressed. Paul could have easily said, well, forget about all the things that God has for me to do. Here I am stuck in jail. It's during the Apostle Paul's prison time that many of his letters are written. Ephesians, Colossians, Philippians. Philippians? Did you ever read Philippians? That's the chapter book on joy. But he's in jail! Because the circumstances he was going through didn't determine whether he had joy. It determined how he faced it. Now I challenge you to use this. There are times we go through difficult things in our lives. can allow one of two things to happen. It can break us, and I'm not trying to be trite, but it can make us too. It can prepare us for what God wants us to do, or it can break us. Let's be like the Apostle Paul in this regard. Let's allow the difficulties of life to prepare us to be used by God even more. Listen, Father, I thank you for this day you've given. Thank you for the way you've worked in our lives. I pray you just continue to be with us now and with us. I pray you would help us, Lord, this day to honor and glorify you in all that we do. Lord, I thank you for the example of the Apostle Paul. Lord, it's a tough act to follow. Help us to do that today. Bless us. In Jesus' name. Amen. I'm going to close in